Good evening and thank you for coming to the event, the 5th edition of DeepTalk. This is the first one we're doing in a phygital form. We've been doing it purely digital until now from the studios. But this time we thought, because Pramod is here, and Pramod hates traveling to the studios, to Hyderabad, I decided to come down here and do it with you. So thank you, Pramod, for coming. In the interest of full disclosure, I should say that Pramod and I have a bit of a history, both as people serving on the advisory committee of CI, and perhaps also a very shared love of software architecture and how things should be done and should not be done. So that also helps greatly in this, and we've been in touch for the last 2 years doing various things. So in many ways, I think when I think of Pramod, I am always reminded that he's a man who's not trying to be a great salesman because he's already a great scalesman, right? He builds the most scalable systems in the country. So I refer to him as a scalesman and not a salesman, right? So in that sense, having Pramod here is in many ways a great thing for us because all of us here in the audience and online over the next 60 minutes or so, we should be able to have a great interaction. I'll start off with a few questions for about 40 minutes. Then I'll open up for you to ask questions to Pramod. And then we will go to online. And there's a whole bunch of chat. There's a whole chat, YouTube streaming that's going on where we normally get a lot of questions. And I'm sure we'll take some from there as well. Is that OK? Great, thank you, and thanks to all of you for coming as well. I know it's a Saturday and it's not easy to navigate Bangalore on a weekend to get here. So thank you for that effort. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Yes, thank you, Pramod. So Pramod, I mean, we talk about identity, and in many ways as Indians, we are used to too many identities, right? If you start thinking about it, we have a mobile phone number, we have maybe multiple mobile phone numbers, we have email IDs, we have Twitter handles. We have passport numbers, we have provident fund account numbers, we have PAN cards, we have voter ID cards, I mean, just to name a few. So when you started thinking about this 10 years ago, building Aadhaar, what came across, I think, was the idea of unique and the idea of digital. So what was the grand vision of Aadhaar 10 years ago? Because with all these identities already in place, what was the need for one more? And why unique and why so fundamental?
Okay, I think there are multiple layers to the answer. One is that the identity itself is multiple and it's contextual. So your identity in your social circle, identity in your professional circle, identity, they differ, and it's up to you actually to define identity. So identity is yours and it's you. Okay, identity itself. Mobile number is not your identity, it's an identifier. Email is an identifier. PAN number is identifier pointing to you. So it's a pointer in a software architecture, right? It's just a pointer to you. It's an identifier. They're all proxies in one sense, pointing to you to claim your identity. When the other part of the question is that we did have lots of government issued attestations or identity documents in the country, PAN cards, and election cards, and so on. Even local ones like the ration card, the PDS card, or NREGA card, and so on. So they existed, always existed. As long as a formal society existed, we always had some paper showing who we are, son of so and so, daughter of so and so, and that's existed all the time. What we did not have, okay, that's very important, is two things. One, a national portable identifier that you can make an identity claim. It's about you making an identity claim. When you walk into a bank, when you walk into an airport, when you travel in the train, you are always making an identity claim when you're going for a job and so on, who you are. Somebody needs to attest that identity claim for making it trustable claim, so that somebody can trust your claim. That is why all these cards existed, right? Otherwise, we didn't need the card. You could have walked in and said, I am Dr. Shantanu, and people will say, yeah, welcome. But people don't know. So people will ask you, how do I know you're Shantanu? Then you show a card from your pocket and say, this is issued by the government and you should trust it. With Aadhaar, there were two purposes. One, the idea of a nationally portable identity, the ability to claim their identity in a national way. Of course, it existed with PAN and passport. though they were national, driver's license to some sense, when the local language driver license were not nationally available, but English-based cards were somewhat usable across the country.
Yeah.
Because that language was another issue for us, right? When you issue an Hindi driver's license, it's not usable somewhere else.
Yeah.
But even more important, which you touched upon, is the uniqueness. I think India had no unique way to attest you that you are indeed a unique person. Your identity claim is indeed unique. That was not existent. PAN card didn't provide a strong uniqueness, passport didn't provide, the passport was very few anyway. No other system provided uniqueness attestation. So Aadhaar was a purpose. Why did we need uniqueness? That's the other question you were asking. Is because India was a very socialistic country. We dole out a lot of money to people, and it eventually we spend about what 300,000 crore, 50 billion US dollars, maybe even more, or every year as direct benefits. And these are not indirect benefits, direct benefits. And it was identified as early. In the early 2000 and definitely during UPA government, Dr. Manmohan Singh time, that it had grown to such large scale that lack of uniqueness caused the leakage to be very, very high. So there was no mechanism for people to actually uniquely identify you and ensure that you indeed deserve to get your entitlements. You get it once and only once. And somebody who should not get it, and that you can only do if your identities are unique. So
yeah.
Aadhaar did, it's very important to also understand, Aadhaar didn't issue an identity. Aadhaar attested your identity, and this is very subtle. People don't fully get it. You walk in and claim your name. Aadhaar didn't give you a name. Aadhaar didn't tell you where you live. Aadhaar, you made a claim to the government. I am who I am. I live in this address. Can you attest me to be a unique and give me a number that is proving that I am indeed unique? So Aadhaar only did attestation, by the way. It didn't issue identity.
Yeah. Excellent.
Okay, so it's very important that unique identity was critical for social benefits program.
Correct. Wonderful. Great. That's a great.
But while we were doing digitally because
Yeah.
we were in 2009. And
of course.
It made sense to do
Made sense.
digital identity.
Perfect. Let's step back in time. I think you grew up as a sort of in a literature, sort of smallish Kerala town.
Yeah, quite small.
I'm sure also people don't know that he comes from the royal family of Kerala, big connections to Raja Ravi Varma and all the famous painters that the family has produced. From there, matrilineal family, Kerala style, then, this whole, tradition connect to the royal family. And then from there, you take this very unique journey of education that ultimately plants you in the US, working for multinational corporations as CTO. And from there, you take a decision 10 years ago to close your chapter of corporate world, which a lot of people want to do but don't actually do it. And then you come into this whole public sector, serving the public good kind of history. So tell us about your journey. I'm sure there are 3-4 huge big highlights you'd like to share with the audience.
I don't know whether the audience wants to listen to it, but since you asked the question.
They're all here.
Yeah, since you asked the question, I can definitely share. Yeah, so I grew up in a small town and learned completely in local language, never spoke English for a long time. Literally college is when first sentences of English I have started speaking. So it's a very typical rural, semi-rural growth. And Kerala royal family is a royal kingdom. Royalty was taken out a long time back. So we grew up like an average, simple middle class family. And my mom is a school teacher. She teaches Malayalam, the best teacher ever. I've come across lots of teachers, but I think she's a great storyteller. She's a fantastic teacher. And father's a hardworking person. We live there, and I think the big shift was actually getting out of the town to do my master's in applied mathematics in Hyderabad, Gachibowli, at your place, by the way.
University of Hyderabad.
Central University, yeah. And that opened up my eyes, and that was a huge change in my life to learn to a cosmo culture and understanding other people, competitiveness and so on. Otherwise I would have just hung around, I think, in the town. But from there then, obviously, I did my GATE and MTech in PhD and all that thing. But then the big shift was really joining Infosys. It was just, again, serendipity. I think it's just randomness taking you to places that I could have joined Wipro, TCS, any other company, anywhere else in the country. Somehow I happened to be in Bangalore, in Infosys. But right time, 93, 94 was a good time to join Infosys because they were going public, they were huge growth spurt. And there I worked with Nandan for 3 months in early, I was programming on the internet as early as 93, 94. I was building full-fledged app servers and so on in 94 with CGI. I don't know if you remember
of course,
the CGI programming and all that thing. Yeah. So it was, CERN, HTTP daemon, you plug stuff in. But that
just before Java hit.
Yeah, just before Java, 0.9 version or something. I think Nandan, I just got in touch with Nandan then and had a good exposure. But actually, the big shift was then is the fact that Infosys started a product startup in Boston and seed funded. And because knowing that they were a services company, they wanted the product company to be separate. So I joined that team. And
this was Yantra.
Yantra Corporation in Boston. It was a supply chain product company and went on to part of the founding team there, become their chief architect, continue to build very large. We dominated retail supply chain in the US. Name any retailer, we own them. And because of that, we got good, we raised funds, got sold out in 2005. I came back by then to Koramangala here to start the engineering with my family. And then 2005 we got acquired, and I was a global CTO for the
Sterling
Commerce until 2009. And 2009, I just read newspaper that Manmohan Singh invited Nandan Nilekani to anchor UID project. It was not called Aadhaar then. It was called Unique Identity Project. And then I thought, hey, why not? So I got in touch with him again, and I said, I want to join. I want to volunteer for this project. And he said, I have no idea whether this will succeed or not. Whether you are in a very good, comfortable position. Are you sure? I said, absolutely sure. My wife and I are very deterministic people. We actually, we have no ambiguity in life and very, very simple life, actually. No happy, optimistic people in life. So we talked about it and decided in 1 week, I quit my job and volunteered for Aadhaar. And then Nandan asked me, are you sure you want to do this crazy stuff? I said, yeah, sure. Why not? What is the big deal?
So when you said you
Worst
volunteered,
case, you'll fail and come back, no?
So you volunteered for a year without getting paid? Is that what I hear?
No, for a couple of years we volunteered. Then they paid us for a year. Then again, I went back to volunteering.
Okay, good.
Yeah, but I'm still formally engaged. So there was because it was a government project, there was a lot of formalism involved in. So they had a mechanism to actually bring volunteers. We invited volunteers and sabbatical people from the industry to participate. We had lots of them. Good sort of technology team. But fun ride for last decade has been totally life-changing.
Tremendous, yeah. So that brings up to the topic of today, which is 1 decade, 1 billion, and then finally one Aadhaar. That seems to be sort of transcending everybody's identity now, right? We all have Aadhaar cards we use as primary ID cards often, right? So when you look back on this 1 billion plus, national identities attested, not created, as you said before. As a software architect, as a chief architect of this project, you must look back on this 10 years and say, those 2, 3, 4 key decisions we made on the design and the architecture has gotten us to this success. What were those main decisions that you look back and say that you're really sort of happy and proud you made those decisions?
Yeah, I think they were a set of policy decisions. They were very, very critical as well. So I'm not going to talk about the policy because that was primarily driven by Nandan and headquarters in Delhi. But I think Nandan leadership there was tremendous to drive to a simplistic, very focused system. And software guys are very notorious for, sort of complicating things. And we like a lot of features and a lot of buttons and all that thing, right, in the UI. So, but it was very, any billion scale system ought to be simple. So I think the idea of 3 architecture principles, but from a technology perspective, 3 architecture principles, if you were to ask, that really lasted well. And looking back, probably the best bet we made is one is absolute minimalism. Absolute minimalism. I think we decided that anything that has to scale to 1 billion people, speaking so many languages, so much diversity across center, state. Now we can even see that relationship playing out. We are a federal structure, and we have to play into all that thing. It makes keeping it really simple was very key. Second, the minimalism of architecture was also very key. Second was openness. I think the entire system being vendor neutral, open source driven, we built entirely on open source. We built entirely on vendor neutral technology. We bought literally nothing to build Aadhaar. And that was a very key decision to be made. And the third, I would think it's really the ecosystem play. I think architecturally we said Aadhaar itself will, the success of Aadhaar will come from our ecosystem adopting and embracing Aadhaar. And that necessitated Aadhaar to be minimal and a platform thinking, or identity as a platform was very, very key for us. So the platformed idea, minimalism idea, and a completely open and open source based system was very key. And open source was probably the hardest bet we had to make.
We'll come to the open source, So we'll come to the open source in a bit, but I'm curious about this minimalism part. Right? I mean, if you look at the complexity of most government identities, which we referred to earlier, they collect, tens and hundreds of fields of data. But Aadhaar is minimalistic in the amount of data it collects, right? It's super distilled down to the barest possible essentials. Could you talk about that? Because in a country like this, you talk about diversity on one side, and then how do you get things down to such a few number of attributes?
Yeah, I think Aadhaar's success, even through the Supreme Court case and during the privacy debate, what came into our success, came into our defense in one sense, is the minimalism. There was a committee set up in 2009 led by Sri N. Vittal.
The famous N. Vittal.
He headed, and he was I was new to government and sitting at the back of the committee, very powerful committee members from every ministry and banks and so on. And at every point, we were desperately and sort of nicely arguing for, and Sri N. Vittal supported that argument so powerfully, to remove attributes from the system. So we said everything, instead of adding attributes, removing was the design. So as a product manager, adding feature was not the idea. Removing feature was the idea. So we kept removing. They said, do you want parent/guardian? So we said, no, why do we need it? Do we need a caste? We said, no, stay away. Why do we need religion? Why do we need religion for identity? Theoretically speaking, by the way, we only need biometrics. If you were, we didn't even need your name. We didn't even need your address. We didn't even need your 4 attributes. We collect 4 attributes: name, date of birth, gender, address. And gender, Aadhaar was always 3 gender. From 2009 itself, we were 3 gender system, formally. Although in practice, the transgenders do always find friction in enrolling themselves, but we have lots of them enrolled as transgenders. And it's all publicly available dashboards. So the 3 attributes, or 4 attributes, name, gender, date of birth, and address, or year of birth, because half the people didn't know date of birth, and then biometrics for uniqueness. Theoretically speaking, we only needed biometrics. If you were actually doing only attestation and giving a number, but in reality, in practice, a government issuing just a number with no identity was not acceptable. People would say, first of all, jokingly, my father-in-law used to say, what is this bad-looking plastic card? After all that thing, that's what you issued, right? A laminated card.
With terrible pictures.
I would say that's the idea. Idea was not to issue anything at all, because you are your identity. You should be able to make your identity claim irrespective of the proxy, the card which is in your pocket. It could have been mobile, it could have been a QR code, it could have been anything, right? But in practice, in country like this, we still love photocopies. We like multiple photocopies, So we are, the country
what will bureaucrats do otherwise?
I think, but they were very supportive. They were I was very amazed how well the minimalism argument was actually supported in the committee. We were nobody, right? But Home Ministry, everybody was there. We kept removing attributes, including name. Whole day in the committee was debated on whether we should have first name, middle name, last name, or just the name. And we decided it was a forced construct on us. The first name, last name was India's forced construct. Actually, we don't have that construct. So we have names like Om, two names with all gods and goddesses and all that from, the state you come from. you work, lots of names in the name. Who are we to say? It's your name. It's your identity. All we are doing is an attestation that you are indeed unique. So this was very carefully crafted 4 attributes. And 4 attributes because there was one killer application that we were after, which is financial inclusion. Yeah. For financial inclusion, under the stronger the compliance got, the PMLA compliance, money laundering act compliance and so on, the harder it became for people to get a bank account. So we said address and name, date of birth address, the year of birth address, and photo, an identity, a photo, a government issued photo identity was critical to open a bank account. Yeah. So we kept to that 4 attributes. Actually, we didn't even need them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I think most people don't know the story of how you just described this product management as eliminating features, right? Which is not what you're paid for usually in most companies. Yeah. Okay, great. I think this is the next question I have is around, I think you and I have talked about this quite a bit last couple of years, that, we have gotten into a world of technology where people think buying commercial software is a necessity. And there's a lot of, fear mongering around this, like FUD, right? That if you do open source, then, you're getting into some trouble, etc. But increasingly, I think, and Aadhaar is probably a great example, and love your thoughts on this, that I think the trade-off between commercial and open source, clearly the open source side is winning, especially in scalable systems. So along the way, what did you do? I mean, you must have felt similar pressures to include commercial. I'm sure vendors would be knocking on the door saying, this is the world's largest project. We need to be in.
Actually,
right?
Actually, Aadhaar was, I would think, the first billion people national government project sort of touching that kind of scale. That bet completely on open source. I think when we put out the RFP, we actually wrote open source. And I don't think vendors took it lightly. Yeah. And at that time, there was a lot of pressure from multiple directions to me to also allow.
Relax the criteria.
Relax the criteria. That's always the case, right, in RFPs. But Ram Sevak Sharma, now Dr. Ram Sevak Sharma, Tri-Chairman, then the CEO of Thing, and Nandan. He was CEO of UIDEA and Chairman was Nandan. Both supported fully, saying that make the call and we'll back you up, but make sure it works. So my responsibility was to ensure we choose reliable, scalable, but we keep it simple, straightforward system architecture. Use open source, they're completely backed up. But in 2012 or 2013, MeitY subsequently actually brought open source as the policy for government project. So that created a lot more support for the subsequent project like GST. And I was part of the GST and I'm still part of the advisory board. The GST is completely built on open source. UPI, we are together there in NPCI, helping NPCI build. Now we are again a billion transaction system a month, completely built on open source. I think people are a lot more comfortable using open source. But I think people think that it is about cheapness or being free. I think it's not necessarily that's the case. Especially public systems, public infrastructure, being not hostaged to a vendor or a proprietary technology is more critical than the cost per se. Cost, eventually you have to deal with the cost of managing. When you are open source, you have to actually have cost of getting the right engineers in and getting it run. So it may not, especially early days, it may not compare cost-wise. It might be cheaper to go proprietary than open source. But in the long run, open source always works out. It's also the case that technology gets commoditized all the time. So open source works out really well. But even more so for a public digital infrastructure. A public infrastructure ought to be open enough to have no embargoes and controls and licensing measures or whatever sort. We should have our own backbone. India should have built our own backbone. Should not depend on exported or imported software.
The open source guru Richard Stallman said this, right? And I kind of love the statement. He said, open source is free, but not in the way you think. It's not free in the sense of no cost. It's free in the sense of freedom, right? That you have freedom to do whatever you want to. It's not freebie, it's freedom. Exactly. Great. So in all of this journey, I mean, I guess you hinted at this, that you took this ownership upon yourself, I presume, to say that open source will work and I will put a barrier for commercial entry, even though that's flying against the norm. And even government is a huge procurer of commercial technology, so this must have been novel to them as well. I'm glad they supported it. But all of this time, you must have also had a few ulcers. You must have thought at times that, my God, have I made the right decisions? Or have you reached points where you say that, okay, I wish, you look at a problem that's just extremely hard. I know that in Aadhaar implementation, there have been moments of great challenge. Would love to hear your thoughts of 2, 3 such challenges where you felt like, my God, why am I even doing this? Yeah.
So I don't think I ever had even a single moment I had doubt that open source was the right decision or not. It was very clear. Open architecture and open source was always a winner. I didn't care much about it at all. But the challenges, sure. For example, especially early days, one thing I can remember is that biometric deduplication. Because that's what Aadhaar does, right? Your uniqueness attestation comes from the fact that we deduplicate against biometrics and actually then make sure you are indeed unique.
That's uniqueness.
That's uniqueness, right? Because there is no foundational documents in India that we can depend on. Birth certificates, a lot of people don't have it. It's also the reason why a lot of uproar now is that people don't have documents enough to prove a lot of things. And that has to be kept in mind in a large country like us. So we use biometric to make uniqueness. And when we talk to experts, no other biometric system in the world existed to this scale. It was the largest was US visit. When you enter US, you give biometric. That was the largest system. And that was about, at that time, 140, now maybe 200 million people. And we were just looking at a 10x scale, right? So when we spoke to experts, they said it's actually technically possible, economically unviable. It's not going to be feasible to do biometric deduplication of 1 billion people. It's an n-square problem, right? So you have to, you will need a field full of, football field full of multi-million-dollar computers.
Supercomputers.
And they almost forced us to think that you need a special purpose computer, hardware to deal with this. Even then, you will need a football field full of them. So it's going to be so costly, and they were saying that, it's going to be hard. That was actually quite disheartening because that's the only premise of Aadhaar. Otherwise, we don't need Aadhaar, right? One more identity card. We already had Aadhaar identity card, so we didn't need one more. So the premise was uniqueness, and uniqueness had to be done. So we actually went back and analyzed the biometric subsystem and asked the question, basic questions. Is it parallelizable? We said, yeah, it's fully parallelizable problem. Your identity deduplication and somebody else's identity deduplication can be done completely parallel. So everybody who's coming in every day, enrolling every day, trying to get an Aadhaar number, can be parallelly processed. That's one good thing.
Yeah.
Anything that is parallel is actually, now you can split across computing concurrently, you can actually run. Then we ask the question, so then it's only a question of when we bet on open source or open computing architecture, what we call a commodity computing architecture, x86 running Linux, not any specialized computer. It might mean more computers are required. That's all, right? Then we ask the question, so you're unbundling the problem. You're in our head unbundling the problem, right? Then you are asking the question, is that a big bet? Is it 2009? We are not going to have 1 billion people. We are going to have 1 billion people 6 years. Moore's law will kick in. And then 6 years later, computing is going to every year double, and the size is going to half. So you can do half the size of the data center, you can do double the compute. So if that's the law, and 6 years, we should be pretty good. Okay, so we continue to bet on commodity. So we actually went with commodity computing, x86, running Linux machines, running completely on open source, fully parallelizable. And you know what is the data center size of Aadhaar? It's 2,500 square feet. It's like an apartment.
Wow.
And 2 data centers.
I had no idea.
All in India. Oh, by the way, everything you heard that we send data outside and all is all wrong. We don't. It's everything always been India. Always will be in India. And it will be 2 data centers and a backup system. Very simple system. Simplicity, man. That makes it life easier. But that was a big bet, risky bet. I remember Nandan asking this multiple times. Pramod, are you actually sure this is going to run? But the good thing, what you do in life is that's one thing I've learned. Because I come from a very average family, not going to engineering, not going to IITs. So one thing you learn is you believe in the foundations of design, architecture design. Second, you surround yourself better people. Rule number 2, always surround yourself with better people. So you reach out to people and collaborate and learn and ask, because if they are better than you, they would tear your design down if it's not good.
Yeah.
So the fact that I went and asked lots of people, really good architects, and they all said, yeah, it's
Makes sense.
foundations are so clean that your architecture should hold good. I said, let's do it.
I love the story about how you kind of took a bet on how Moore's law will come to your rescue, right? I mean, it's almost like laying
And it worked very well.
It's like laying the tracks of a train as the train
Yeah,
is coming
yeah.
along, right? It's you
So
just lay the tracks.
Nandan uses
Yeah.
the word, trend is your friend. Okay? Never battle the trend. You don't go, you just ride the mobiles and internet and commoditization of computing. Cloud is a trend.
Yeah.
You don't battle it. You just ride it.
Yeah.
Ride
Surf
the
on the
like
wave.
a surfer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good. So with this mention of 2 data centers and all of that, and I don't want to ask you where they are. That's fair. But having
Google
said,
knows anyway.
yeah, but of course. But having said
They've
that,
mapped everything, I think.
yeah. But having said all that, I was just wondering that there's so much noise about, not noise, but legitimate concern about data privacy, data protection.
yeah,
And,
absolutely.
I mean, if I lose my PAN card, I can issue another one. I can lose my driver's license, I can issue another one.
Yeah.
My biometrics get stolen.
Yeah.
Then what do I do, right? I mean, I have only the same thumb
Yeah.
for the rest
Yeah,
of my
yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
So the question is, to what extent have you solved the problem of protection, privacy, and security in Aadhaar? Because I'm just thinking that if I was a malactor, Aadhaar would be a fantastic database to target.
Yeah.
Because it would just send so much panic down the system,
Yeah.
right? Anything happened
Yeah.
there. So what have
So
you
there are
done?
two parts of the question. There is a security aspect of the
Yeah.
question and then the privacy aspect of the question. And let me talk about security first. So there were two parts of Aadhaar. The basic core identity data that you have supplied, which is the name, date of birth, gender, address, which is pretty much available everywhere else, and you tend to give that in the PAN card or postal card, driver's license, and you apply for a bank account, you have to write your address and you have to write your name. All of them are changeable. So good thing is that including name and gender, by the way. Under the law, you can just change them, no big deal. And Aadhaar allows you to update them as well. On the other side is biometric. So protection of these two were very distinctly articulated. So the identity card or identity that you carry around doesn't have biometric. It only has your name, date of birth, address, photograph, which is what your normal identity cards have it.
Yeah.
Biometric was collected for attestation purposes,
Yeah.
and that was secured in the data center, never to let out. Now under the Aadhaar Act, it can't be used for any purposes other than attestation, not even for legal purpose, except with cabinet minister's approval
Yeah.
for any major national, which is always a, unfortunately laws have to be written in that sense, so I suppose that's how it's done. But the protection of biometric was very carefully done, and I think we have zero. I can absolutely confidently say that we have zero incidents so far, zero incidents of our data center, data leaking out of data center, and enormous details of security. In fact, every field is split, every data is split across data center. Every field is separately digitally signed through, we have thousands of public keys and private keys, PKI infrastructure. Every field is digitally signed, so our database administrator can't even see the data. Our own internal guys, we sort of call it trust no one architecture. We didn't even believe that internal folks would be also trustable.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, some data center operator, outsourced individual who's sitting in the night, what do you trust?
If anything, that's where the incidents come
That's
from.
most of the insider attack or whatever
Yeah,
we call
yeah.
it, right? That's what happens. So we were very careful in protecting, and we have zero incidents so far. Where we have had difficulty is when you give Aadhaar card to other people. Let's say you go to a bank or you go to an NREGA and apply for. We had this government websites had this. Lot of government websites tend to be quasi built by a small RFP, not very well thought out. Like a national system like Aadhaar is easy, or a UPI. We tend to spend a lot more time.
Yeah.
And whereas a website in Bihar or Jharkhand, they have used an RFP to build some website. They tend to leak your Aadhaar card details. So what happens is there were a lot of incidents of your Aadhaar number and name, date of birth, gender, whatever you provided to them,
Showing up on
getting
the
leaked
internet.
in LPG website and other website, right? So, and also people uploading it. Very weird reasons, people upload their own into Facebook. Also, we have people if you simply strive for Aadhaar card and do Google images, you will find people's Aadhaar card actually there.
What's the reason? Is it just
No, I think people are, it's one
they're
of those
proud of
things.
their
And
Aadhaar
privacy is a very, people want privacy. When you ask them, do you want privacy? They say, yeah. But if you say, what exactly privacy? They don't know. So there's a Stanford study about kids wanting, everybody arguing for privacy. And in a jiffy with free pizza, they would easily give out their phone number or email or what do you want? Free pizza? I'll get free pizza, right? I'll write whatever I want. So it's a very weird notion that, so people tend to be very light about it. It's also to do with the government system. A lot of government sites also had the other confusion. RTI, it's a very important thing. RTI traditionally forced the government to put out lot of, like muster roll of NREGA, would be put out by design. Pensioners are actually listed.
My God.
People who are actually getting LPG subsidies are listed in IOCL website. Because that's what we
RTI
wanted.
requirement.
By the way, that's what we wanted as community under the RTI. But what is happening as the RTI, the systems get digitized, such information is easy to manipulate now, easy to download as an Excel sheet, right? Now suddenly gets harder. So there was a line where the RTI, what in RTI is actually, whether your muster roll or a pensioner list is there, can their address be, look, go to election card data, you will get all your address. Everything is on, including your photograph is on PDFs on website, right? So it's not the main demographic data, what we call, always existed because of the transparency reason of the government. But I think with the data protection law coming in, I think we are going to go through a huge heartburn in the country. By a government would say, I can't disclose anything because I am scared to disclose because it might be getting in data privacy violation. But on the other hand, RTI, we want them to say who benefited out of taxpayers' money. So I don't know how we will navigate it, but we are a democracy. We are a bunch of random,
Debaters.
and India is fun, and I think we'll navigate. I suppose I'm an optimist, so I think we'll eventually navigate.
This is fantastic.
So protection of security was very important. Privacy, on the other hand, was very different. Privacy was very carefully crafted through minimalism it was a design of privacy. Why we don't want capture data, because we knew. And then we also said every transparency, that every time you authenticate, you will get to download all your authentication. You go to Aadhaar, you can actually download all your update history, authentication history at any time, knowing that who authenticated you. Now we have added virtual ID, we have added tokenization, so the Aadhaar numbers are not stored in databases at all now. Most of these databases in banks are already tokenized. That means every database has a different number. It doesn't have the same Aadhaar number. So the mergeability gets harder. And so on and so on. I think a bunch of privacy ideas were, and you can also, I don't know whether you guys know, you can also lock your Aadhaar. So your question of biometric getting stolen, that was the idea that you can actually lock your biometrics. You can actually go to Aadhaar website or use Aadhaar app, and you can lock your biometrics.
So it can't be taken out.
No, even if somebody takes it out. No, it's not about taking it. See, it's very important. The question you have to ask is not whether, you are probably leaving your biometrics right now.
Yeah, on the fingerprints.
On the fingerprints, on the
bottle,
glasses and so on. So forget Aadhaar being hacked. Capturing your biometric is not hard. But because you are, your biometric you leave behind. Your face is left behind. Today with face matching and face recognition.
Recording YouTube live.
Yeah, you probably is already detecting who we are by YouTube system, right? Google system. So I think it's important to say your biometric is not secret. It's private. It's not secret.
It's yours.
The question we were asking is that how can you control it so that somebody can't misuse it? So if you lock your biometric, even if you give biometric to somebody, they can't authenticate you.
I see.
So the idea was locking was that.
Interesting. Okay, very good. So I think one thing we can look forward to based on this conversation is that this whole RTI and the privacy law are in for a major time of conflict.
Also convenience versus privacy. It's
always a trade-off. Okay. So, I mean, you haven't really stopped with Aadhaar, right? I mean, in the last 10 years, if I look back, you've been a very prolific software architect. You've been involved.
Prolific, I don't know.
I mean, I'll just list it for people. They'll know it's prolific. India Stack, a lot of it, UPI, GST, what else? E-sign, DigiLocker, all citizen scale, billion people at least in mind applications, perhaps 2 billion, more than that. So if you look at this whole thing, the sense I get is last 10 years, you have kind of become a different kind of software architect. You become a software architect who's working with the idea of public good in mind.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I don't think there are too many people in the country who can say that that's what they do for a living, right?
Yeah.
So what is your philosophy around software architecture itself as an instrument of public good?
Excellent question. The reason why we are even talking like this and doing YouTube live is internet was public good.
Yeah.
And somebody who created internet decided that HTTP is not going to be a private protocol. It's going to be a public protocol. HTML is going to be a public standard under W3C. Thankfully, it was early days of the good times of internet, where the professors and good, people who were sitting around for no such malicious purposes designing for good. SMTP was a good protocol that we still exchange email. You can use Yahoo, I can use Gmail, somebody can use Outlook. It doesn't really matter. We can actually communicate. But the post-GPS, the post-2000, with the arrival of Google and Facebook and so on,
Amazon, yeah.
they pretty much, I think, that's what they should do. I think if you're a business responsible for shareholders' value creation, your idea is to create moats. So you create as much walled garden, closed garden, and create moat to yourself to grow. And that's what Facebook has done with acquisition of WhatsApp and Instagram and all that thing with them. And Google pretty much being underlying operating system for the internet, and Android, every sensory information that you are generating is pretty much available.
And YouTube is another acquisition, not just Android.
Oh, they're all acquisitions. So these two have really played at scale to capture that, capture and create walled gardens. So one of the idea was that why should we limit ourselves to creating public infrastructure or digital infrastructure with internet? Why can't we create further more and more public infrastructure? Should payment be a public infrastructure? Sending money? Should
paying bills
should be a public infrastructure? Should for example, DigiLocker, the idea of credentialing, your CBSE certificate or school college certificate and so on, your ability to carry your certificate in a portable and acceptable way to anywhere. Should that be a public infrastructure? So we were asking those questions the last decade. In the last decade, we were fundamentally asking that question: what is the minimum digital infrastructure that we can lay? Minimalistic, because I think that's what at scale we need to do. Minimalistic, if we can build highways, shipyards, airports, we should be able to build digital highways as well. So digital, so FASTag or UPI and so on, every one of them is actually a protocol play. So what we are doing systematically is to create minimalistic open protocols or open systems that is minimal in nature, but providing fundamentally interoperability and portability, so that the marketplace and the civil society innovates on top of the digital infrastructure, because letting one entity like government innovating is also a bad idea. Letting one private company innovating is also a bad idea. You want lots of innovation to have. Only when you have thousands of experiments, you have some success coming out, right?
Sure.
But the playground for creating, playground to innovate is the infrastructure play. And luckily, we had all the support from a regulator like RBI supporting UPI, with NPCI as an entity hugely enthusiastic about it, supporting and implementing it.
Yeah.
Or on the other hand, MeitY implementing e-sign protocol for interoperable digital signature protocol, or DigiLocker for credential portability, Aadhaar as a portable identity, and so on. And XStep, that's where I'm working currently, is building digital infrastructure for K-12 education, completely as a public good. And it's an amazingly fulfilling activity. But what the architecture principles though, pre-2009, I was in a private company as a CTO building private value. How you architect for private value and architect for public innovation is slightly different. And that was a good fun journey. 10 years.
Fantastic. So, I mean, I'm looking at it and saying that, you know, in antitrust discussions around the world, especially Europe and
That's
now.
very important.
So there's a big tech, you know, this whole name companies that you
Anything
named.
big people hate. Yeah.
There was a big tech,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's a big
Yeah.
tech cluster of companies that, you know, even the governments are now coming down upon heavily because they're becoming somewhat anti-citizen or you know, consumer. And then there is an open tech, if I may use that word, what you're proposing, which is large-scale open tech, right? So there's a big tech, open tech debate in which you're clearly on the open tech side.
No, actually, if I were to say that it is open infrastructure and big, it's an open tech and
For
big
innovation,
tech.
yeah.
It's not open tech versus big tech. So I think UPI is a classic example.
Correct.
Where
Yeah.
the store of value, which is where you put the money, is regulated, protected, controlled.
Yeah.
But the transmission of value is an open protocol, which is UPI.
Yeah.
UPI is TCP/IP. If
Correct.
TCP/IP moves packet and GSM moves voice packet, UPI moves money packet. Think of that way.
Yeah.
That's all it does. It's a transmission protocol.
Yeah.
But all the apps you are seeing on top of that is all big tech apps. Actually, Google Pay is one of the leading.
Users of UPI.
And if you look at they wrote to Feds recently, right? I don't know whether some of you saw that.
Yeah, the letter.
Yeah, the letter they wrote to Fed saying that
Learn from UPI.
Learn from India. India is a gold
Innovator.
standard where a regulated environment, an open infrastructure, and a private innovation on top is played together and not a versus story.
Yeah.
I think also to the fact that we have US has, if you look at it, let these private one or two entities lock itself out into a walled garden, so much so that they are now saying break them up.
Yeah, innovation is hurting.
It's like a baby bell all over again there in the US, right?
Innovation is hurting, yeah.
No, but our way of doing that is not to let them grow and break them up. India has always done saying that, no, build the open infrastructure where multiple people can thrive. It also is required because of our diversity. India cannot, if you only need is a silver bullet for solving health problem or education problem, we would have solved it. We don't have one. We don't even know what to do.
Yeah,
we don't even know what to do with jobs. We really have no solution that easily. So the way, if you don't know the solution, how do you go about doing it? Is by building infrastructure and letting many experiments thrive, so that you see these pockets of success that are coming out.
1,000 points of innovation. Yeah. So in fact, I mean, the regional diversity itself, you know, you need BHIM in 25 languages, for example, I mean, to start with, as a simple example of that, right?
Absolutely.
Payment applications.
Yeah.
I have a lot of questions to follow, but I'll just quickly finish up now because I think the audience would love to ask some questions too. If you really look at, you know, what's happening in the Indian industry today, IT industry in particular, tech industry, these are turbulent times. I mean, one side there's a sweep of deep tech, AI, machine learning, blockchain, you know, there's a huge transformation of technology itself, making, you know, experience almost a liability. You know, we used to say that I have 10 years experience. Today, I think people don't say a great amount of pride because liability, what used to be an asset, number of years of experience, suddenly appears to be a potential liability for people. You know, you're afraid the young guys know it more.
They know it more actually.
Yeah, I know. But so that we agree. So that's one I think point of turbulence. The other point of turbulence I think is, you know, learning open source. As you said, that's changing as well. And then finally, the business models are changing. From your time of Infosys Yantra, it's a huge change. I mean, just look at the newspapers. You know, so much disruption happening in terms of employment, even in the so-called safe IT sector. So what is your advice to today's professionals, tech professionals, about what skills, what mindsets, perhaps skill set we overemphasize, but sometimes mindsets are bigger things to change and break, right? Unlearning is harder. So what mindsets and skill sets do you think today's technology professionals need to really internalize so that they are really future-proof in a true sense?
I think the only thing you can do is to be a continuous learner. I think the only advice I can give is if you are not learning constantly and disrupting what you do yourself, you are not different from a large company, incumbent companies who get disrupted by somebody else. So youngsters are disrupting you not because they know more than you. I think experience is definitely valuable. That's because you have let yourself, the lethargy set in saying that what I learned is still useful. It's actually not useful. What you learned, the patterns of what you have learned may be useful. The experiences may be useful. But you still have to be relevant today. So I think being relevant today requires you to be a lifelong learner. If you are not a lifelong learner and a lifelong disruptor to yourself, you are in not very quickly you will raise up in pretty bad scenarios. Okay, and IT in companies are not, because I don't think their opportunities have gone. World, like Mark Anderson said, software is eating the world, and it's only more and more. Now maybe AI is eating software, but I don't know where it goes. Nevertheless, everything is being softwareized. The camera software, everything is software. What it really means is that everybody is becoming a programmer. In one sense, where the doctors are becoming, IT savvy and so on, right? So if you look at it, it's very important. I don't think the opportunities have gone. They are just two large companies who have not disrupted themselves. So they are in incumbent situation where new age companies are new startups, and Indian youngsters want to do their own. So a lot of good engineers don't tend to join these companies. So you are in a little bit of a soup of saying you are a place where you're not attracting top talent, and that sort of creates another issue where top talent don't recruit top talent. So in the sense, quest of you have seen that
A to A and B to C.
Yeah. So always the case. A to A always, and B to C happens. So you are in the B to C situation with a lot of these companies. But I think opportunities have not gone. Not at all. I think the number of opportunities for software play, or being programmer, an architect in your mind. Architect means a maker in your mind, a builder in your mind. You have to be a builder, you have to be a learner. Only two things I can say. If you're a builder and if you're a learner, you can survive pretty well.
Fabulous. Yeah. Great advice. My last question to you, we heard about the last 10 years of what your journey, which is very interesting. The next 10 years, what do you think is big? I mean, what will happen in identity management in terms of citizen scale in India? Let's talk about India, because that's a common area of interest in this. Is there some major convergence coming in public systems, kind of things that we've been working on, infrastructure? Is there a point of singularity out there where everything becomes really easy and totally rules change of identity management? Any thoughts?
No, identity per se. See, Aadhaar was, you don't want to consider, it was never designed to be a single identity. It was designed to be a unique identity. Okay, not a single identity. You can have any number of identities. So the idea is that you can use an identity. You walk into your office, you are actually scanning your employee identity, employee card or whatever, right? So identities will be layered. So point number one, identities will be layered. Identity is always a trust of that identity claim comes from the fact that who attested that. So attestation is going to be big. That's why the blockchains and all that thing, it's a little bit of, it's a partly hyped up, but nevertheless the idea of attestation in the blockchain world is very attractive.
Very powerful.
Because I think it's very powerful. When you need a lot of attestation, Aadhaar was a unique attestation done by the government. Yeah. Your employer might give you an attestation and so on, right? So attestations are very powerful. But I think the biggest change, I think two big change we can look forward in India is that we are going to continue to build. I think India has definitely set the leadership role for the world. No question about it. I am so confidently I can tell you that world is looking up. We need our own affirmation by world is telling us. Okay, once in a while we need, MIT telling that it's a good thing. But otherwise, other than that, we have done really good things. Okay, we just need to believe that we have done good things. But I think it's a complexity of the realization of those good things take time, because a billion people scale. Even today, you see issues with some food delivery not happening because of Aadhaar card missing and all that thing. Very sad. Humans creating friction for humans continue to exist.
Of course.
Humans are notoriously known for it, and we'll continue to find reasons to fight, I think, fight and create friction. But other than that, technology will, one thing you can look forward to in India is that we will create open infrastructure. And we have found that magic bullet. We will continue to build open infrastructure for payment, we have built for taxation, for lending, we are building for education, we are building for health stack as part of the healthcare, really democratizing access. At the end of the day, tech is only enabling access to opportunities, access to resources that otherwise you may not have had access. Yeah. Whether that access translates itself to an outcome, we don't know. Giving access to healthcare, we don't have doctors. We will never have enough doctors for our population. So the only way you can actually democratize that access by bringing technology
Telemedicine, yeah.
and creating humans who are partly trained, who can actually use technology to still deliver a reasonable quality healthcare, and that is access to healthcare, right? So I think opportunities and access, democratizing access is the biggest bet we can do. And the other part is AI, the impact of AI and automation. It's very high, but I think India should find a way to use AI to amplify human capability and not replace human capability.
Correct.
If India can find that balance of amplifying human capability through tech, we will do a much better job than replacing paradigm
AI
of US. It's a very much replacing paradigm.
AI assisted.
AI. Tech, we need
Yeah,
tech.
absolutely,
We need
yeah.
tech. We have no choice but to do tech. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think we almost killed most of the hour here. Thanks to
sorry
you.
about
Let's
that.
open up.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll go over a few minutes if required. Please, the floor is open. The mics are available. Raise your hand and the mic will come to you. Please also just mention your name so that we can refer back to you. Yeah.
There are some questions.
We'll take them later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, it's working, I think. Just tap it. Tap it.
Hello?
Yeah.
My name is Parmesh. Is there any plan which is combining UPI and attestation together? UPI and Aadhaar together. In one of the video I saw in China, most of the transactions are done by face identification. So if I go to a shop and I try to do the UPI transaction, and is this possible to, in future, Aadhaar is going to attest that transaction?
Yeah, so very good question. I think if you look at the way UPI was designed, and there's a reason why we called it Unified Payment Interface, is also the fact that India roughly, and Nandan has articulated this many times, as that we have 1/3 smartphone, 1/3 feature phone, 1/3 no phone. So we are lots of people with, but how do you create an inclusive infrastructure? Infrastructure should be inclusive, like a highway. You can cycle, you can through bullock carts and auto rickshaw, but you can also have Benz on the highway, right? So it's very important that the infrastructure is inclusive. So UPI is designed to do that. And UPI, so far, what you are seeing is a smartphone usage of UPI. UPI and NPCI had also launched Star 99, which is a feature phone use of UPI. But a no phone use of UPI is an alternate system, which is not running on the UPI as a brand name. It's called AEPS, Aadhaar Enabled Payment System. And you'll be surprised, we do 200 million transactions every month. Roughly about 100 million people use fingerprint to transact money with no cards, no mobile phone, no smartphones. And they can actually send money to their family, withdraw money and so on, using those point of sale systems with a fingerprint device. And with the postal bank now coming in, the post office is going to carry to every doorstep, banking at your doorstep. Very, very powerful imagination to happen. That is very inclusive infrastructure. But phase in UPI has been talked about, technically possible, quite easy to do. Do we need to bring in now? What does it mean? It's a choice given to people. Is it secure enough? We'll think through some of that, but it's quite possible to imagine that you can use a face to do a UPI transaction, or a face and PIN if you want a higher value transaction, multi-factor, right? To strengthen further, yeah, possible. Yeah.
I think face also has a bigger privacy concerns, which I think China
So,
is not exactly.
No, there's a difference between. Aadhaar doesn't do face recognition. It does not do face recognition. So you can't send a face to Aadhaar and ask who this person is.
Yeah.
So you can't capture from CCTV and send it to Aadhaar. Okay, Aadhaar has no such facility. You have to give your Aadhaar number and the face. Then it will tell you yes or no, whether your face matches with the face you gave when you enrolled.
It's the same face you had
It's the same face you originally enrolled. That's all it is, right? It's a very simple system. Yeah.
So you were talking about a lot of open infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
Everything is running on open infrastructure of all
Open
the government
source,
sectors.
yeah.
That open infrastructure is pure open infrastructure, or it is supported from the commercial platform which provides?
Excellent question. So I think the question, if I were to reply, is basically, do governments using, or some of this Aadhaar project or GSTN project, UPI for that matter, do they use open source but also buy support from commercial vendors? Yes, some parts they do buy support. For example, UPI uses Kafka, Postgre, UP have billion transactions running on all this stuff, right? And Linux machines on. But on the operating system side, they have bought support. They have bought Red Hat Linux or one of the Oracle Linux or one of the supported versions for security patches, because they don't have internal Linux kernel engineers who can get the latest compilation done. So capacity is being the pure reason. Aadhaar has bought support for database and operating system, but not for messaging, not for Hadoop, but for many systems.
Also, another question that for the Aadhaar, right? Can you give more insight on Aadhaar? How can we leverage for the day-to-day life, Aadhaar?
Yeah, so so UIDI offers direct. UID is not for citizens, you know that. It's all for residents of a country. Anybody who is living here, non-citizen can have Aadhaar. We give interface to do three things, right? Enroll yourself, that's one interface. You go to UIDS center, enroll yourself. Update your data, so various times you want to change address and so on, phone number. Third is authentication, in case authentication or some download of Aadhaar or something. These features were traditionally available on the UIDA website, and they were limited, but now they have enhanced a lot more. They have made the website also, UIDA has made the website also mobile friendly, because most of Indians access website also through Android phone. So the mobile friendliness of the thing was. Aadhaar is actually giving a native app that allows whatever features that UIDA is giving you. You can download QR code, signed QR code, you can show that. You can download Aadhaar, you can lock your biometrics, you can lock your Aadhaar out.
That lock means what exactly?
When you lock it, it's basically saying that nobody can authenticate without you unlocking. So even if you if somebody theoretically takes your fingerprint and gets hold of your Aadhaar number, they can't try to fake the authentication. It will fail because you have locked it away. Think of credit card. Imagine you have an app with a card, can lock your card. Even if I give the card and PIN, it won't go through, because you have locked it in through an alternate channel. So this locking is an alternate channel, and when you unlock it, it temporarily unlocks it. You know when you're going to authenticate, right? Before authenticate, you can unlock it, and it locks itself after that. Yeah, it's a big block card. You know, it's but it's called locking. It's not blocking because of fraudulent case. You are locking yourself.
All right. So I think I guess some of the questions that we now see are in some sense variations of previous questions. We can scroll down a little further. Take maybe one of these. Okay, I have this question. This is a good one. Uday Kumar's question about scalability in peak hours. So through the year, are there actually peaks in the usage of the transactions coming in, or is it pretty much a smooth?
Enrollment was smoothened out because we
It was staggered.
No, we had enrollment from first. It took 1 year to get to first, maybe less than 100,000 to a million, 1 lakh to a 10 lakh kind of number of Aadhaars. Within a year, we went into every day we had 1 million. So every day across the country, we had 1 million people standing in line, applying for Aadhaar. Next day, another 1 million is standing. Think about it. So you can't pile up for another day, because next day another 1 million will come. Every day we had, and at peak we went up to 1.6 million every day. So 1.6 million mapped against 4 million. It's like trillions and trillions of computing required. But quite doable in open source, quite doable in a small data center. You'll be surprised if you keep it simple, stupid, really keep it simple, stupid. Works out well.
So keep it simple and stupid. That's your motto now.
That's the motto. Yes. But authentication was actually authentication is unpredictable a little more for us because I think that peaks on and off. And authentication we had scaled down to 100 million a day. We had reached 100 million a day.
Really?
100 million a day we had reached authentication. That is when the SIM card linking was going on.
Oh, okay.
But with Supreme Court restricting the mandatory part of it, which is I think good thing. We should not mandate Aadhaar for everything. It should be left to people to use which identity they want, unless it's a government thing, which is what eventually the verdict was. Unless the government taxpayers' money is being doled out, then you can't cheat the system, so you need unique identity. Otherwise, you really don't need it, right? The authentication now, we are doing about 35 million, I think, a day.
So AEPS would be one of the big ones, right? Now
AEPS is a big one. Yeah. Attendance is a big
200
one.
200 million divided by 30, that's right there.
Yeah, attendance is a big one. PDS, ration. By the way, PDS, Andhra did PDS portability. Traditionally, you could only go to one shop to get your food because the ledger was kept in that shop. They didn't. You couldn't go to another shop and get it.
So branch banking.
The branch banking days, the earlier days of. But the problem is that the bargaining power is always with the provider, not with the consumer. Okay, he can say, "Aaj sugar nahi hai." And what will you do? Nothing you can do because it's the only shop you can go. So you have to beg and plead. Andhra did portability across the state. 2 days back, I read that 11 states have joined for portability across states.
Wow.
So if you have an Aadhaar and if you are entitled to 10 kg of rice or whatever in a month,
Could be in
you
Punjab,
will actually
yeah.
get anywhere. It's amazing because India is half of our Indians are moving around in the country. We are a very mobile country. Youngsters are moving around. And they need support. They can't say, go back to your village to eat rice. I mean, they have to eat here, man. They are in Kerala. Half the people are working somewhere else, right? So what do you do? So I think the portability, the way we all take advantage of bank portability and ATM portability, food entitlement, pension should be portable. Doesn't matter. That's what unique identity has done.
Even
to
loan
you.
applications, I was thinking there was a time when
Anywhere
loan
you can
applications
apply.
go back to your district and
Yeah,
apply for the
yeah,
regional
yeah.
branch of Central Bank of
It's
India.
good to see this coming.
Yeah,
So I think
fantastic.
so. Authentication is fluctuating, but 35 million a day.
So with that, we'll close.
All right.
It's been half an hour over.
Sorry
I
about
think
that.
you said your mother's a great teacher. I assume that she thinks you are a great teacher as a son. You've done a fantastic job. So never a dull moment, Pramod, as usual. Thank you so much.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Thank you. Yeah.